From physics to turntables, gaming to programming, and then becoming an internet sensation.
Ta-da! Look, this is starting to look like a space shuttle, huh?
We all know and love Scott Manley for his signature and
fly safe.
But being a journalist, I had some questions for Scott Manley. I decided to reach out to him and see if he would grace us with an interview by actually going to his house in Northern California. And I guess if you ask, you shall receive. So I flew to San Francisco. I drove to an area that I'd rather not share because he does have a lot of followers online and we don't want anyone to be creepy. And I finally made it to the Manley residence.
So I'm at Scott Manley's house, and I have my journal of questions.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
So we're in Scott Manley's studio.
Oh, studio. This is like organized chaos in here. Let's close the door so you can get a full appreciation for the fact that this is actually still larger than most space capsules, but has a lot more stuff laying around.
It looks bigger in the videos.
Yeah, you know, that's because I use a wide-angle lens.
Yeah.
It's magic.
It is.
But yeah, I mean, you know, like, this is the set.
Wow.
And that's the computers that do everything, and Lego models and art. It's absolutely, yeah, it's better than the place I used to have, where it was just a little corner and a nook.
Oh, wow.
In theory, this is a sofa that converts to a bed, but I think we've only ever used it once. Oh, yes.
Wow. When did you get that?
Oh, several years ago. A few years ago, I don't know. It took a while to get. You know, I'm not one of these YouTubers that grew really fast. It was something that was slow and progressive over a very long time of consistently having viewers.
Right.
But yeah, you know, over that time, I've gone from being video game person into space person. Yeah, I mean, here's Jebediah Kerman, of course, very important to who I am. Let's say, Jebediah, always smiling, always happy, except when things are exploding. But even then, he's just he's still in his heart a rocket person, steely-eyed missile man.
Wow. What is your favorite little toy?
Well, I mean, my favorite one is the Saturn V Lego model. I wouldn't call that a toy.
Did you make it?
Oh, yeah. So that's a standard Lego kit, right? And then the tower. So the tower was designed by some Lego fans, and unfortunately, it's very hard to get the pieces. And that is it's a knockoff, and I felt really bad. So I went and sent the original designers a bunch of money. But I would have loved a real Lego version of this.
Right.
But the tower is very, very cool. The space shuttle is pretty special as well. That's the newest one.
These are so cool.
I know, everyone sees this model in the background, like the Saturn V, and they're like, oh, where did you get that? I see the Lego one online, but never... you know, like, where did you get a good model? I was like, that is the Lego model.
Yeah.
The Lego model is so good.
I'm not going to show your email, but it looks like you have 31,000 unread emails.
Wait, let me just, I can bring out this. Like, for people that have problems, the bottom of my phone.
Oh, stop.
397,000.
I'm surprised you answered my email.
I'm actually very good at filtering out stuff.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, you know, and I've got my knickknacks, which we have in the background. My favourite ones recently are these from Astra. These are Christmas decorations from Astra, who are based in Alameda.
I was trying to get a hold of them.
This is, I'm also do a bit on nuclear physics, so this is a Chernobyl liquidator medal. What? So basically, because the radiation levels were so high, they would kill anything electronic really fast. But they figured out they could have some people run out, clear some stuff, work for 1 minute, and then go home.
Wow.
And they all got one of these medals.
Wow.
So, you know, it's sort of really cool and disturbing and weird, but
all at the same time.
They're also really easy to get a hold of because lots of people got them.
Wow.
But yeah, it's got, you know, the drop of blood, and then you've got these radiation tracks. You've got an alpha going off to this direction, and you've got a beta going off there, and a gamma going up through the middle.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
cool. When did you get that?
I don't know, I bought it off of eBay.
Nice. Nice.
It's kind of cool. Yes, that was actually sent by a fan who did yarn art.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
and I was
cool.
blown away. Like, I felt, I almost missed it in the email.
Wow.
Yeah, but that is Jebediah Kerman. Well, it's actually me, because you'll notice that he's wearing
headphones
on the right ear, but not on the left ear.
Oh my gosh.
And that's something I sort of characteristically do from my years as a DJ.
Yeah.
So I'll put it on my right and not my left.
I think I did notice that when we zoomed, but I didn't think anything of it.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time trying to be famous as a DJ, but I rocked the parties that I rocked, but never enough parties to really make it a major thing.
I wonder if now with your following you could.
I don't think I'd have the spare time, to be honest. Yeah, California knows how to party.
California.
I
am a California girl.
Yeah, oh good. Well, of course, the first thing to do is...
Yes.
We'll do that at the end.
All right.
Hey.
And then you have to also say fly safe, right?
We'll do that right at the end, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
I also want to know how that came about.
Oh, wait, fly safe?
Yeah, for you.
Is this the interview now?
Yes.
Oh, well, fly safe. So obviously, hello is just hello. But fly safe actually comes from a video game that I played a lot in the early days of my channel called EVE Online. And the thing about fly safe is it's not really grammatically correct for English. It should be fly safely.
Yeah.
But I think that's largely because EVE Online is a game that was popular around the world, and not everybody spoke perfect English. EVE Online was very popular in Russia, apparently. Like, the Russian alliances would be extraordinarily devoted to that game. Really? So anyway, that became the sort of sign-off that people would use in text on their chats, and so I adopted it mainly, because when I started my YouTube channel properly, I started my YouTube channel originally just because I got an iPhone, and I was like, I can post to YouTube.
Yes.
Here's my daughter walking up with the stairs with sunglasses. Isn't she so cute? At some point, I was playing EVE Online, and I thought, what would be cool? I could have a picture of a video of my 4-year-old daughter playing this game that people think is too complicated for PhDs. There was a lot of coaching involved, but it got a fair number of views, and it got me a small nucleus of the channel, and then I used that to actually basically create a guide to the game so that people would sign up for the game with my link and I would get game time. And now I'm looking at a century or more of game time in that game.
Oh my.
I was able to take, from the earnings I made from this in the game, I was able to take my in-game money that I got from recommending people to play it, and bid on an item in that game, which the money from that was then converted from game money into real money that was donated to Australian wildfire relief. $40,000, and I'm so happy that I was able to do something useful with that YouTube channel thing.
That's insane. Was that when was that? Pretty recently?
That was just 2020.
Yeah,
in fact,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it was very early 2020, and I did this, and of course we sort of did a bit of a news thing. I had to explain to the world why I'd spent $40,000 on an internet spaceship. And of course, the people that run the game, CCP Games in Iceland, they put on this like a fan fest, right? Where everybody goes up and they talk about internet spaceships. And of course, that was just before COVID hit. And I was going to go there, and then they were like, no, we can't do this. But we're hoping that it will happen this year.
Okay.
And I'm really looking forward to be able to go to Iceland and talk about real spaceships and internet spaceships.
When will it maybe be?
It should be in April or May. Okay. I don't remember, but it's in Iceland, and it's for spaceship nerds, like internet spaceship nerds.
It sounds like it could be the year.
It could be, yeah. Yeah, EVE Online was very important to the starting of my channel because it got a sort of nucleus of space followers.
Right. Well, I have a lot of questions.
Oh my goodness.
But before we get into the questions, I do want to start with where you grew up, your background, your education. When did you come here?
Okay, wow, there's a lot of stories there.
I know.
So I grew up, I was born in Scotland, on the west coast, best coast. So I'm still on the west coast. A little place called Troon, which is very famous for golf.
Okay.
I hate golf as a result. Surrounded by golf courses. You can't look anywhere without there being a golf course. But yeah, this was 1970s, and one of my earliest memories is getting taken to see the movie Star Wars. And my dad was a bit of a sci-fi fan, and so, I was just permanently surrounded by science fiction and would look at the stars and, think about what I could do. So as a child, of course, I wanted to be Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Come at me! And then, as I sort of learned more about space, I realized that's just a story. I want to be an astronaut.
Okay.
And you know what? There's not many Scottish astronauts because there's no Scottish space program. So I, at some point, set my sights a little lower. I want to study astronomy, and so I did. I went through school. Not the easiest of times of school, but I did come out of it with good grades and went to the University of Glasgow, where I studied physics and astronomy. And the thing is, at that point, I was working summer jobs, and I very much realized that, boy, academia is so much more my thing. Like, I don't want to go out and do this real world job thing. Oh. So after I completed my bachelor's, I went and did a master's. I was like, great, I can stay doing this. And I studied computational physics and, basically got some actual computer skills. And I managed to then stay in academia by going into a PhD in Northern Ireland in astronomy and physics at Armagh Observatory. And that's where I really began to experiment with, a lot of science ideas. So I was supposed to be studying small bodies, asteroids, comets. And I really, really got fascinated by the asteroid impact hazard. But somewhere along the line, I guess I was decent at writing code and decent at talking about space with other people. Not very good at actually writing papers or thesis. Like 5 years into a 3-year PhD, it was very clear that I wasn't on my path.
Interesting.
And then, so there's the other side of me that came along. My dad was really into astronomy and space and stuff, but he was also really into music.
What did he do?
He was an engineer.
Okay.
An old style mechanical, design engineer. And he taught me a lot of stuff about drawing, technical drawing, like actual, before CAD came along, on paper, drafting, I think they call it here. And, I won the prize for drafting in my school. Same year as I won the prize for home economics. So that was sewing and cooking. I know. But yeah, he did that. And so I was always, again, surrounded by a lot of these ideas. But yeah, he was really into music, and I'd been raised to learn and think about music and love music. And I was sort of obsessive music collector. And I guess one night, I'd be on the internet talking with people about music. And one night, while I was not entirely sober, I wrote some software so I could stream MP3 radio to other people on the internet. And, it was like a tiny unknown chat channel. But, I managed to run this little radio station, and I sort of released the code, but not really. And somehow along the lines, somebody in the US found out, and they were like, okay, we'd like you to come and work for us. And I was like, sure, 5 years in my 3-year PhD, this is the time for me to actually do a real job that I think I can actually do. And that's how I came to the US.
Wow.
So that was 99 and then 2000, and I've stayed here ever since.
Wow.
And
have you always been here?
I've always been in the Bay Area,
okay.
Yes. So I came over to work for a music company called MyPlay, which did cloud storage of music, which this was in 1999, where people still had modems. The idea of having your stuff in the cloud was maybe a bit ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Also worked at Napster.
Okay.
It was the last engineer they hired.
Wow.
That was an interesting time, and did a little sideways into InfoSec because I was always on the sort of into computer security. And then from there, I eventually went through a bunch of companies and ended up acquired at my current job where I work on AI and machine learning. But before all that, of course, YouTube beckoned.
Yes. So what year would you say YouTube?
So yeah, the year I know when YouTube
2008. No.
No, well, YouTube came out 2005, and the funny thing is, at that same time, I was working at a different company that wanted to do internet video. And my first experience with YouTube was uploading content to YouTube and figuring out what YouTube was doing so I could do it better on mine.
Okay.
So my first YouTube account is long gone. But when I got the iPhone and I started uploading, that's the same account that I use. Right. So the very first videos are like the mural in the park, in Maxwell Park in Oakland. They just completed this thing. And frankly, I've not really felt the need to diversify. You get me, right? Mm-hmm. And me is a lot of different things. There's a bit of family videos, a bit of DJ, and a whole lot of science and games.
Yeah.
But my YouTube channel really got proper attention, I think it was 2010.
Okay.
I took a bit of research from my astronomy and had created this really cool animated map of the solar system showing the discovery of asteroids. And so you could see where they were when they were discovered because you'd see a little flash of light. Mm-hmm. And this made some really cool patterns. You could see that we mostly discovered asteroids looking away from the sun. Mm-hmm. And you could see, sometimes you would see a burst in one direction because it lined up with Jupiter because people were looking for moons near Jupiter and they found these asteroids instead. So that video, it got huge. It got on like Slashdot and it got 1 million views and I was super hyped and super excited. Wow. And I never made any money off of that, of course.
Oh no.
So the funny thing was, I uploaded that video and I shared it with some buddies and then they shared it with some buddies and it wasn't finished. There was no music on it. So when it started to get really big, I was like, okay, I'm going to put some music on it. And YouTube had this thing where you could just like select a piece of music and put it over the top. And I chose a track by a band called Triphonic, who I knew sort of locally. They were producers that were in the Bay Area. And that was it. And I think they've got all the proceeds from it. And they deserve it because they make great music.
How long did it take you to make that video?
Oh, wow.
The animation?
The software actually took sort of on and off for years to develop. The hard part was actually collecting all the data. Mm-hmm. The hardest part was figuring out where an asteroid was when it was discovered because we didn't have actual discovery dates for most of them. What we did have was their provisional names, which would include a year and a 2-week window in where they could have been discovered.
Okay.
So for those ones I could make a guess. For other ones, we had the exact date and time. Like Ceres, we know was discovered like on January 1st, on 1801, I think.
Wow. That's crazy that you came here for music, even though your education was astronomy and physics.
But I had, so one of the things I like to point out is that any educational background in hard sciences is very useful if you're wanting to do computer programming. And there's a lot of demand for computer programming. I see a lot of people in my day job who they studied chemistry and now they're doing computer programming. Wow. Because that's where there's a demand and it's not that hard. If you're going to do real science these days, you're probably going to be doing data manipulation and software, and so you're going to pick up those skills. I was always a hardcore computer nerd, though.
Yeah.
Always.
When you came here, did you have a renewed interest in trying to become an astronaut?
It sort of stayed by the wayside until I suddenly became a US citizen, which took a while because it's not an easy system to navigate.
What year?
Oh, like 2017, I think I finally became a US citizen.
No way.
I kind of took my time, and it's very hard when you come in on an H1 visa to actually turn it into a real... Yeah,
that's crazy.
I took longer than it should have, I think.
Okay.
I was a green card for a long time.
That seems like a long time.
But yeah, and then NASA, they ask for astronauts. I'm like, oh wait, I'm qualified. Because it's like master's degree.
Yeah.
And some actual science work. And that was it.
Right.
and a US citizen.
Right.
And so I was like, well, I have to do it because I would regret not doing it.
So did you try?
Oh yeah, totally. And
no.
I totally failed out in terms of not being nearly as good as the amazing people they selected.
Wow.
Well, everyone they picked, they all have pilot training, and believe it or not, I don't actually have any pilot's license. Despite spending a lot of time flying internet spaceships.
I was gonna say, despite flying safe,
Yes.
have you wanted to learn how to fly?
I have a pilot's yoke setup that I got for Christmas, and I've been in X-plane, actually going through checklists and actually practicing all the maneuvers. And the airfield nearest me, they have a nice list of people that train, and every single one of their websites is broken.
Oh no!
So I'm going to have to go a little further afield. I'm going to find somebody now, but I'm this close, to actually starting to do it properly. The thing that really, there's this funny moment where a few years ago, they tweeted, it's like, I just got my private pilot's license, thanks to Chuck Yeager, Buzz Aldrin, and Scott. Two of these things are not like me.
Oh my God.
It's I felt embarrassed.
Wow.
I have to actually do this now.
Yeah.
So it's taken me a while.
That will be so cool.
I will.
Is that something in the near term?
I think honestly by the summer I could be totally legal and legit.
Wow. Oh yeah, I read an article recently that there's an astronaut shortage.
That's an interesting thing because they just actually selected 10 astronauts. Yeah. And this is true. What's been happening is during the shuttle program, there was a lot of astronauts, right? Because they were able to fly up to 7 people with every flight. And the more the shuttle flew, the more value for money they got from it. But now the last 10 years, they've only been able to fly on Soyuz, and a lot of astronauts sort of have left. They've retired early because their chance of flying was much lower. There was other offers out there. And so I think now that we've got Crew Dragon flying, and we're hopefully going to get Starliner flying, and we've got SLS, there's now going to be a bigger demand for astronauts. And I think NASA is going to find that. But I don't think they're going to run out of volunteers by any mean. It takes 2 years or so to go through basic astronaut candidate training and become qualified to fly.
Right.
But on the other hand, depending upon what you're doing, if you look at Inspiration 4, they went through a fairly solid amount of training for that, and they were flying in 6 months.
Right.
So I don't think that they will have any lack of people that want to fly, and I don't think they will have any lack of candidates who can, rise to the occasion.
Right.
And I'm here if you need me.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm reading a book called Packing for Mars by Mary Roach.
She's a fabulous author.
It's great. And it really just highlights that, being an astronaut is not glamorous at all, really, the actual work, right? And the travel. I mean, it seems very scary and
it's a lot of reading.
And
But you're doing stuff that nobody else does.
Right, right.
And I think, you just have to be comfortable and excited you appreciate the benefits that you have, right? Yeah, there's a lot of deep technical stuff, and there's astronauts who have never been to space. Just they were qualified, and then the flight scheduling didn't work out. Deke Slayton famously, he was in the Apollo, he was in the Mercury 7, right? Mm-hmm. And then he had a heart problem or something they identified, and instead of kicking him out, the way they worked with that was he became head of the astronaut office. Wow. He basically became the spokesperson for those astronauts. And he maintained this position through Gemini and into Apollo. And finally, his medical clearance came through, and he assigned himself to the Apollo Soyuz test project. So he did fly. Wow. But you can be an astronaut and not necessarily fly, but you will still have a lot of the necessary skills and understanding.
Right. I guess I'm thinking about she points out the motion sickness.
Oh yeah.
And, I mean, just all these things that I hadn't thought about. What happens if you throw up, and how does that?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, a book.
No, I've heard of astronauts who flew once and then didn't fly again, and they had extreme motion sickness.
Yeah.
That's just. I mean, I've almost witnessed this, sitting next to an astronaut who will remain nameless in a planetarium, and them closing their eyes because of motion sickness.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, there is that. And then there's just the awfully unglamorous problem with toilets in space.
Yes.
Those are, I've gone into this many times about the Apollo bag situation and how the space shuttle's toilet was specified to be an essential part of the flight apparatus, meaning if it failed, they had to come home as quickly as possible. Because the alternative option was the Apollo bags, which were considered so disgusting, nobody wanted to be doing the whole mission with them.
Should we get started on these many questions?
Wait, we're not even started?
No.
Good Lord.
I know. So you can answer these, however thoroughly you'd like to. And a lot of these came from my audience. So I said, hey, I'm going to be interviewing Scott. I'm not going to say they're all great questions, but I think a lot of them are interesting.
I've been answering a lot of questions lately, for sure.
Well, people, want your knowledge. So we already actually did one of them. The second one was let's talk education, career background, and YouTube evolution. So we kind of checked that one off.
Yeah, well, there's one part of the YouTube evolution we missed, and that was after the asteroid video and the EVE Online videos. Some Kerbal space program came along, and I was sort of uniquely positioned as knowing enough orbital mechanics to actually play and explain the game.
Hello, it's Scott Manley here, and today I want to take a quick look at what I think are the best mods for Kerbal space program.
Do people think you're a rocket scientist?
Yes, literally. I had that comment on a video today. Like somebody says, I was talking about black holes and I kind of had a hard time explaining a particular concept, and somebody made a comment. It's like, never ask a rocket scientist to explain an astronomical thing. It's like, let me tell you, that's what my multiple degrees are in. Right?
Oh my gosh.
So no, and this is the funny thing is, I'm not a rocket scientist. Yeah. I totally have. I think my advantage is that I've come in and had to learn it to not sound like an idiot, but I've learned it from a point of view who's somebody who knew just enough engineering and just enough science to be able to put the pieces together and maybe get some sort of aspect of the understanding that people that work in it maybe don't have, right. Or maybe some other one. Not that I understand it better than them, but I might get a better handle on how to explain it. Because I don't like to do anything where I don't have an extra level of explanation. You ask a question, you give an answer, the response is why. You keep asking why until you don't know.
It's crazy. So many people think that Scott is actually a rocket scientist, but as you heard from him, he basically taught himself all of this stuff. The thing is, the best way to learn anything is actually by doing it yourself. And obviously Scott knows a lot about astrophysics, but you can too. You can learn interactively with Brilliant's fun, hands-on lessons in math, science, and computer science. And no one likes those boring lecture videos. Learning interactively actually helps you learn 6 times better than just sitting through a lecture. You can unlock cosmic wonders from star life cycles to the fate of our universe. While Scott does a great job of explaining things, I have had some people tell me they might still have trouble following along, and so by hopping on Brilliant and taking one of these courses in astrophysics, you can give yourself that base knowledge so that you can understand these videos more thoroughly and have a better foundation. Millions of people are already learning on Brilliant, and I have a special offer for you for watching my video here on Ellie in Space. If you head to brilliant.org/EllieInSpace, you can get started for free with these interactive lessons. The first 200 listeners will also get a 20% off an annual membership.
Has it ever made you want to become a rocket scientist?
It's made me want to build stuff, for sure, but I don't have the time for that, and I don't want to work at any of the rocket or space companies now because I'm sort of in a decent position in my current day job, but also as soon as you pick one of these companies, everything you say is tainted by that, right? So I'm in this organization that's outside of this,
right?
And I can make speculations, I can make informed ideas, and I can maybe call them on a few mistakes and not feel bad about it.
Speak freely about it.
Yeah, but I'm a very positive person. I don't like to knock people down. I like to just talk and not be encumbered by any commitments.
Are people surprised that you haven't, I mean, I'm sure most people aren't if they're like understanding, but haven't given up your day job, because you could go full-time YouTube.
I could, but then I'd probably be having sponsorships and stuff, and you know, talking about Raid, Shadow, Legion. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and you told me kind of why, you know, it's good to have a backup plan, and, you know, all these kids today want to be TikTokers and YouTubers and...
Yeah, I think it's good to have backup plans. Yeah, as I said, I encourage that for everyone to have skills that can adapt to many possible outcomes.
Right.
And yeah, it's great if you can make it successful as an influencer, sure. But you know, if you still have that degree in engineering, great, do that as well.
Right. Do you still DJ ever?
Not publicly, but I do still dig through music and play records from... I mean, this is a tiny part of my collection. I've got another room in there that's full. It's not full, but there's like another 10 boxes of those records there. I had to get rid of 1,000 records as well before I came here. And there is a drill bit here. Good Lord, I'm glad I noticed that.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so... what is going on? No, the sound's not coming through yet. Okay, now I need to find it in here. Here we go, Future Sound of London. And so this is from a video game from 1997. And it had a lot of really cool soundtrack stuff on it. Daft Punk and Chemical Brothers, Future Sound of London. But yeah, that is, says a lot of who I am. I have like all of the Beatles here, but I don't tend to mix with that. That's Billie Eilish, again, Sky.
Billie Eilish is great.
Yeah, I got to see her a few years ago. With Sky. I don't know what to pull.
No, that's great. Let's talk about Raptor 2 development and utilization and how this would increase Starship capability or change things.
Okay.
That's a loaded question.
That's a lot. Well, I mean, so we've just seen, according to the folks at NASA Spaceflight, we've just seen Raptor 2 engines on the test stand. I've seen some interesting views of the interiors of Raptor 2, but I don't know how much of that I could actually understand and or explain. But yeah, I mean, the main thing is Raptor 2 is an evolution, and it's supposed to generate 235 tons of thrust. It's like an extra 50 tons of thrust. So that the good part of that is it means you need fewer engines, right? But also, you could have the same number of engines and carry a whole lot more mass on your second stage. So at this point, Raptor 2 is going to be pretty much essential to making Starship, the booster, much more reliable and better. But it's going to increase the amount of mass to orbit, because this is the big danger of Starship, is that they're talking about like 150 tons to orbit, but any extra mass that they add to that second stage means less payload mass. And they're still redesigning the structure of this vehicle, and they're trying to get the thinnest walls, trying to get the lightest heat shield, but every time they can't make their goal, they're losing payload. Getting more thrust is going to help on the first stage because it means they can put more propellant in the second stage. Getting more performance in the second sage just helps because you don't need, you can carry, again, you can make your second stage bigger. So SpaceX right now, with Raptor 1, I don't think they can meet their performance goals, and I think they know that. And Raptor 2 is just a way of approaching that and getting closer to what they think they can do, or what they want to do.
What they need to do.
Yeah, I mean, what they need to do. The thing is, if they say can only get 150 tons, if they can get 150 tons to orbit, great. But if they can only get 80 tons to orbit, suddenly you're not talking like half a dozen refueling missions, you're talking 12 refueling missions. So that really starts to,
you have to start asking, is this viable anymore?
Right.
Even then, even if you only get 80 tons to orbit, say, that's actually still a really good low Earth orbit delivery system. But it may not be the best solution for sending things to the moon or to Mars anymore, right? It might be having something that doesn't have all the extra fluff needed for a lander, may or may not make sense. I think that we're in the very early days of this program still, and we've got a long time ahead of it. So it could evolve in many ways, and there will be times when things are surprising.
What is your opinion on SpaceX actually catching a Starship?
Oof, it's going to be spectacular either way. I mean, look, seriously, this is something which we've done in simulations and Kerbal Space Program and stuff like that, right? Sure, it works on paper, but, there's all sorts of things that you find out when you actually put it into production. And it isn't just like landing the Starship now on having to do the belly flop and transition. Sure, they've solved that. Now, this is something where they're not landing on a concrete pad, they're landing on a very complicated structure, and failures are going to damage the structure. Whereas if you damage your concrete pad, more concrete, right? This is obviously a very good thing on paper in terms of improving your mass to space and mass to orbit, but it vastly increases the risk when you're testing, because now you're risking very expensive hardware and potentially very long times fixing things. And the big problem with the really big boosters is, this thing is like, it's springy, right? There's actually a lot of flexure in the structure. And if you land it on the back, then, you're basically putting a compression force up the top. And that means you need to have like a suspension in there to shock absorbers. If you can get rid of all of that, you can save a huge amount of potential mass. And I'm surprised that they're doing this with the booster, to be honest, because the booster is less concerned about its mass ratio. It's the second stage where the mass ratio becomes, the dry mass, wet mass becomes important. Either way, on paper it works. It's a question of, can they actually demonstrate? Can they move it fast enough? And I'm looking forward to seeing them try, and I won't be surprised if they decide to abandon it at some point, because they tried the fairings and they just couldn't make it work. If they crash a few of these things, they might go back to just landing on legs. I'm not sure how, but again, this is early days. Things will change.
Right.
We know it could work in theory, but that's a long way from making it work in practice.
Are you going to try to go to the orbital launch?
That's a good question. It depends on when that is. My thing is, I always have to plan a fairly long time ahead. And, SpaceX, they do something, or they plan to do something, and the date just changes all the time. Sometimes it moves to the left, sometimes it moves to the right, but it's very rarely when you're actually planning on doing something, right?
Have you been to Boca Chica?
I've not. Because it's been mostly during COVID times, and that makes things complicated.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
I think I want to go. I think I want to hang out and watch stuff. And what I really want to do is have cocktails in the high bay bar at some point. Because I had an Apollo astronaut say, when will we be having cocktails in the high bay bar? And I'm like, whenever you're ready.
Wow. I did, when I went there, I got to eat at the SpaceX restaurant, the Flaps.
Oh, yeah?
And it was pretty cool.
Oh, that's neat.
Good food. Good food.
Cool.
I wanted to see Elon. He was not there that night.
See, I never ask anyone for invites or anything. It's just always people come to me and they're like, do you want to come? And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Have you talked to Elon?
Only random comments on Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm very, as I said, I'm pretty chill, and I wouldn't put myself out there.
Yeah.
Because, the threat of rejection is so hard for me to handle.
I feel like Elon is either extremely loved, almost in like a cult way, or a lot of people don't like him. Where do you stand?
Well, I'm like squarely in the middle, because I know exactly where he's coming from, and because I've been around all these people that were doing, the internet in the 90s and the early 90s. And so I totally sort of understand who he is and perhaps why he says some of these things. I appreciate the good things. and sort of facepalm sometimes at some of the other things. But I think that I think I do actually straddle this position fairly neatly, because I'll make a video about it and I'll get people accusing me of being an Elon hater. And then the next comment will be someone that accuses me of being a total SpaceX fanboy.
Really?
And you know
Which
what?
means you're in the middle.
I'm in the middle.
Because if you get both people accusing you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be. I'm trying to give everything a fair render, and I want everything to work out.
Yeah. What about Blue Origin and Jeff Bezos? Are you?
I totally want them to succeed. I would like. I don't. We don't find out enough about these ones. We're always trying to infer what's going on by second and third hand comments. So someone driving by, the door's open at the factory, and I saw this. What is it? You know? Yeah, I think the thing about SpaceX. One of the reasons why it is so transformatively popular right now is because so much of their stuff is happening in public, and it's mostly because. They just put this thing up so quickly. They didn't really establish a perimeter or try to do it in secret. They're just like, whatever.
Oh, it's wild. I mean, it's literally on the side of the road.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
And Blue Origin, they're doing all stuff under, in secret and whatever. Like in Astra as well. I remember when they moved in and people were like, there's a rocket here. And they went and did all this investigation and found these applications that they'd made to the Alameda, Navy base managers for their project, and I got the details of their rocket. Yeah, like that kind of stuff is fun in and of itself, but it's much more fun to just watch everything out there and see it happen.
Right.
If modern rockets need to refuel at their destination everywhere they go, are they actually an effective method of transport, or will we need a new method of propulsion and energy-dense fuel that will let us travel longer distances without refueling all the time? It doesn't seem efficient to need to build a refueling station at every place we travel to.
We have airports where planes refuel all the time, so needing to refuel isn't necessarily a problem, but being able to go further before you need to refuel is definitely helpful. Yeah, look, we absolutely want better propulsion systems. We are using chemical propulsion because that's the only way we know to get to space. But once we're in space, there's a lot of options that we haven't tried out. We certainly haven't done any human-rated missions that use electric propulsion or nuclear propulsion. And then, of course, if you go way out into the world of sci-fi, you have fusion pellets and things like that, where you've got the Epstein drive from The Expanse, right? So I think yes and yes. Like, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But we still would like the better engines.
All right. A couple people asked this. Is your name real?
Yes, that is my real name.
Okay.
I totally didn't make it. I do get it. It's like, is that your real name? It's like, yes. My daughter, she has the name Scott Manley, and she's like, but don't worry, we gave her a very girly middle name so she can pick. That was what the name my parents gave me, and it's been a real blessing because it makes me totally confident with who I am, which is very powerful.
Yes.
Okay. Is your voice natural? Someone asked.
So my voice is sort of natural. First of all, the accent is natural, as you can attest, but there's a definite dose of me also having a background in stage performance. Because I wasn't very confident at school, but I would take every opportunity to get on stage.
Really?
And you got to project towards the back of the room and everything. So yeah, that's where a lot of this comes from.
Was this for like a play?
Yeah, plays. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
I did several Scottish plays.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Like what age?
Late teens into my early 20s. I joined like an amateur dramatics group before I went off to do my PhD.
Okay.
And yeah, I really enjoyed that kind of thing.
He's a thespian.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Barely,
What was your favorite play?
Oh.
And what role were you?
I actually don't remember the name of the role, but I think my favorite would be this Slab Boys trilogy. There was 3 of those plays, and I was the sort of posh git who would be getting picked on. But yeah, I quite like that. It was a funny play, and I had some great performers along with me who actually had real talent.
I was gonna say, is there like a line that you remember from it?
God, no.
No.
There's the one. I'm not even going to do the one I remember because I was supposed to be playing an Italian that couldn't do. Sorry, a Scotsman playing an Italian who couldn't do an Italian accent.
Oh. Okay.
And it was the first line. It was a terrible. It actually won some award, that play as well, but I don't remember it. I just remember having to do it every time and fall down dead.
Oh my
Or
gosh.
fake dead.
Right.
Yeah, this is a. Yeah, I as I said, at school I had a hard time relating to people, and it worked better when I was put in a context where I was understood what I was supposed to be doing. And
Why do you think you had a hard time relating to people? That's interesting to me.
I don't know.
You're shy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was incredibly shy. I think it comes down to I'm totally okay talking to cameras and people as long as I know what my role is. But if you send me into a room of random people and nobody knows who I am, it's just like
awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so the DJ thing. I mean, this is the story I tell. Like, I would go to parties and not really know what to do, and so I'd end up sort of in the corner with a bunch of nerds looking through the record collection and talking about music, and that eventually turned into standing in the corner of the room playing the music.
Wow.
And again, that put you in a context where you understood what your role was,
right.
And so that was my way of breaking through a lot of social problems I had.
Wow. Someone asked about Earth-Moon cycler orbits. Is there a stable one?
I don't think there's an Earth-Moon. I mean, there's pseudo-stable one. All of these require, maneuvering. But there's definitely an Earth-Moon cycler that would make sense, but it would require maintenance to keep it. And the question is, which orbits require the least amount of maintenance,
right? But
also require the least amount of extra delta V to get to and from it. There's cyclers where it swings between the moon and the Earth at some period which is a multiple of the lunar period. And you can get on it, you obviously need to accelerate up to speed, and then on the way out, before or after you get there, you jump off and you arrive at the moon. It doesn't really make that much sense for a lunar cycler. It makes much more, the longer the journey, the more it makes sense. So it makes much more sense for a Mars cycler because that's something where you're spending months on it. Mm-hmm. A lunar cycler is like a week. I mean, you could sit in a car for a week. We've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like road trip.
Yeah. Yep. Or just traffic in some places in California.
God.
It feels like a week.
Oh, I'm so glad I don't have to commute.
Yeah. You posted about this recently on Twitter. Let's talk about the Falcon 9 second stage crashing and impacting the moon March 4th.
I'm very excited for this. I think it's hilarious that people are trying to make this into, oh my god, what's this happening? SpaceX smashing things, or like, this out of control stage is going to crash into the moon. Yeah, look, this is a rocket stage which was launched in 2015. Yep, it was the Discover spacecraft, which has a storied history all of its own. And it went to put this out to the L1 point, which is the Lagrange point between the Earth and the Sun. And once it sent it there, this Lagrange point, it's sort of balanced between the Earth and the Sun. And so the rocket stage ended up roughly in that area. Mm-hmm. And it's now after 5 or 6, 7 years.
7.
Yeah, it's swinging back and it's going to smash into the moon. And it's going to make a crater. And hopefully we will have some science out of it. That's what I'm interested in, because we haven't had an object this big and this fast hit the moon in a very long time. We used to do that with the Apollo third stages. Those would be smashed into the moon. Like the Apollo 13 third stage smashed into the moon and triggered the seismometers from Apollo 12.
Wow. So
there's this recording of them talking about this over the radio, obviously before things went sideways.
By the way, Aquarius, we see the results now from 12's seismometer. Looks like your booster just hit the moon and it's rocking it a little bit. Over.
Yeah, smashing stuff into the moon is an interesting way to learn things about it.
I was going to say, with the science that we expect to get out of it, like, what are we going to find, do you think? or learn?
I don't think there'll be anything particularly transformative. What we do have is a number of like rovers on the surface, Chinese rovers. I don't know if they have seismometers or anything that would be able to detect anything. I don't think so. What we might see is a dust plume, and if the dust plume, if there's other satellites such as Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter and Chandrayaan-2 in the right place, they might be able to image that. But I'm not sure Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter is well suited to that kind of imaging, because it's more about trying to image the surface. I'm not sure about India's thing. So what we might just do is get another crater on the surface and see exposed regolith and get spectra that shows some evidence of change in the surface. I don't know. At this point, we're trying to figure out where it's going to hit and what instruments we can put on it. There's no... It's going to be on the far side of the moon, unfortunately, so we can't see it from Earth.
Oh, man. Darn.
And there's there's a minor danger to satellites. If the plume was sufficiently powerful, you could actually have some debris impinge on these satellites, and they might actually, if it turns out that they're going to be in the vicinity of this plume at near to the time, they might actually have to take some action where they turn the sensors away from the orbital motion. So
the moon regolith is no joke.
Well, it's mostly anything is no joke when you're traveling at 2.5 kilometers per second or whatever. Like, marshmallows are no joke when you're traveling at those speeds.
Good point. Why hasn't NASA done what SpaceX has achieved? What do they need to speed up their work realistically?
I mean, look, NASA is a way of sending money to various institutions and keeping people in jobs and whatever. NASA, when they have been sort of voted by Congress into building SLS, and that was after they had Constellation cancelled. So yeah, look, NASA basically has been given this money, which they can only spend on this one project, and that there's no requirement that it be delivered with any promptness. That's the thing. NASA can do satellites. They have done spacecraft in very short time periods. There's all these smaller things that aren't constrained by all this political baggage. So NASA can move fast if it wants to, and has done in the past. And you just have to look and find those projects where NASA has done things. And I'm actually blanking on any of them.
It's all right.
Like, I think Ingenuity is actually a fine example of a project that was done on a pretty small budget and was done very quickly.
I mean, should we get rid of the red tape? Should we cut
so
down?
The red tape is something that's put in there by politicians because they wanted these space centers to build it. They didn't care what it was building. Right? They just wanted to make sure that the money was going in these places. So they defined the requirements in such a way that the only possible way to do it was with these solid boosters and these old space shuttle engines. It's a lot of this is politics.
Yeah.
And I think I'm happy to have any money spent on space. It would be nice if it was a little more free to spend it on things that were well planned or planned by engineers rather than politicians.
But also, I mean, the private companies are just growing exponentially, right?
I mean, not everyone is moving as fast as SpaceX as well. This is actually how NASA has managed to execute is by basically creating programs where private companies can come in and spend the money and do these things and build them fast. And SpaceX is a fine example, but equally you got to remember that Orbital Sciences, they stood up the Antares vehicle very, very quickly as well. Not as quickly as SpaceX, but they didn't have they had less of a head start, let's say.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be owned by NASA to be a NASA project.
Right.
Whatever.
True. No, that's a good answer. When Starship is orbital, do you think the newest heat shields will be efficient? Do Starship tiles have an advantage over the space shuttle? And if so, how much of an advantage, whether time to install, maintain, durability, redundancy?
Now, I totally know what you're saying.
Okay.
Look, the space shuttle had this immensely complex heat shield because it was a very complex shape, and they had to have all these different tile shapes to deal with these little curves in the root of the wing and over the top, and they were also very small sometimes. And so that meant that it took a very long time to check, and if there was one that was the wrong size or what was broken, they needed to find that specific one or even make that specific one. They're trying to get around a lot of these problems with changes to the heat shield design. First of all, they're using much bigger tiles. The other thing they're doing is they're securing them with pins in the back so that they clip them on just by pushing them on in theory, and then they're supposed to remain stuck. I think they have to drill them out to actually take them off. So that means that they can cover the whole side much faster, but equally, if one breaks or cracks, which is more likely because they're bigger, then you lose more of your heat shield. And SpaceX, it's not just these tiles. You've got this layer of this, mineral fabric underneath, this sort of foam that is, or not so much a foam, but it's more like a insulating layer. That's just as important. That's going to arrest, airflows behind it. So can they solve this problem? They have to solve this problem, right? That's basically the answer.
Yeah.
There's no other way around it. And what can they do to make it better? Maybe they do go back to gluing things on if they can't get the pins to work. What I've seen is that somebody showed me pictures they took of recovered tiles, and they showed that the clips at the back weren't failing. The tiles were like falling off without these clips being properly secured. So that seems to be something that they may have addressed, but they may not.
When will High Bay 2 be functioning, and how will that change things?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not following it enough. Look, they're going to have more space to build things, and they need more space to build things. Right? But ultimately, I think their problem isn't building things quickly enough now. It's getting the legal framework and permissions all figured out to actually get their review done, and there's no guarantee that's certain at this point.
Are they still using pressurized helium to help pressurize fuel chambers to prevent sloshing on the landing burn? Was this a temporary fix? Helium is rare.
Well, helium being rare is neither here nor there, to be honest, because it's still relatively cheap compared to the cost of hardware. I believe that they stopped doing that after number 10. So number 10 was the one that it came down and it didn't slow down enough. And that was attributed to that they'd used helium as a pressurant for the landing, and that they had small bubbles in there, which didn't disappear. So they didn't get enough mass flow through. So when they commanded more throttle, they never got it. So I think they're going back to... I think they've solved their problems with autogenous pressurization. That's what I would imagine, because they've successfully landed. I mean, they're talking... When I saw the interview with Elon, he's very specifically talking about using ullage gas for reaction control thrusters. So helium is great for certain applications because it's the lightest gas you can get and has boils at very low temperatures. But it's not used... If you can eliminate it, you're not going to get it on Mars. That's the thing. On the Earth, we get it because it's trapped in with other gases. Because helium is produced by alpha decay of radioactive elements, and then that percolates up and gets trapped inside oil layers, and so it's a sort of side effect of gas extraction. Now helium-3, that's much more interesting because that's primordial. Yeah, helium-3 is one of the most expensive things you can get. It's a type of helium with 2 protons and 1 neutron, and it's used in fusion experiments.
Where do you get it?
It comes from the earliest days of the universe. There's a small amount in the crust of it. It forms in high energetic events with cosmic rays. There's possibly some in the surface of the moon, but it's stupendously expensive. They use it for imaging the lungs. When you put it, I think it's an MRI imaging. I don't know exactly what it is, but because it has a different number of protons and neutrons, the nuclear resonance is different. And so when people are getting lung scans, they'll get them to breathe the helium-3, and it's so valuable they get them to exhale back into the bag.
What?
So they can recover this.
Whoa.
It's like a lung full of air, a gas, and now...
That's crazy.
Yeah. Anyway,
I'm going to need to do some research on
yeah,
that.
helium-3 is this thing that's like, oh, we can find helium-3 in the moon, we can be rich. It's like, actually, we can't figure out how to use it as a nuclear fuel just yet. But it's, yeah.
But it would help to find an abundance.
Oh, yeah.
Of it.
There's lots of uses for this stuff.
Yeah,
It's
interesting.
also used in cooling of scientific instruments.
Wow.
Yeah.
How easy or hard is it to orbit L2 in regards to Webb? And then I don't know if this also ties in, but how long to track celestial objects in order to get long photographic exposure times?
Okay, so once you get out to L2, you just need very small maneuver burns to actually stay close to it. And the trick is figuring out where your best one is. So it's just a mathematical problem, you know. And what you do is you say, okay, if I make a burn on this date and try different solutions, which one keeps me closest to my ideal orbit? And yeah, that's pretty much what you do. So James Webb will be doing maneuvers every few weeks to sort of maintain. They'll be very small, you know, and they'll be able to do that for years. How does James Webb track this thing? Usually you'll use like star trackers so that you figure out where it's pointing. So you'll have your reference stars, and they'll use that with the main instruments to make sure that it's tracking the right thing. I'm not sure what they ask it. The other possibility is, how long does it take, say, when you find an asteroid, to figure out its orbit so you can track it? And, you know, you want to have multiple shots over several days so you can get an initial orbit determination. And then you want to track it on every time the Earth comes close to it. So you'll typically have, you know, 4 or 5 years before an asteroid gets enough data that you can give it a number and then potentially a name.
Wow. And you have an asteroid named
Yeah.
after you.
Asteroid 33434.
Tell us how that came about.
It was a fan, a viewer who had discovered a number of asteroids. And so if you discover asteroids, you can give them names.
And what did that mean to you?
Oh, it was the most amazing thing. Because I'd studied asteroids, and I was always around people that had asteroids named after them.
Wow.
So now, yes, I do have a minor planet named after myself, and it's a very boring asteroid right in the middle of the main belt. It's about 5 kilometers across. I know very little about it, but I'm excited that it's out there.
But it's yours.
It's not mine. No, it's just named after me.
It's
If somebody else goes out there and mines it, I can't tell them no.
okay. But it's named after you.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
it is.
Not a lot of people can say they have that.
No, it is kind of fascinating. There's also rules, like, if you're a politician, you can't get an asteroid named after you.
Really?
Yeah, politician or like people primarily known for political or military exploits, it has to be 100 years after their death.
What?
Yeah, so that, you can't basically buy funding for your space program by naming asteroids after people.
Does it cost money to name an asteroid,
No.
or is it more just like the recognition from the person who...
Right,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to sell naming rights. And by the way, companies that offer to name stars, complete bullshit.
Okay.
Complete, right?
I've seen that advertised to me recently.
It's garbage.
Yeah.
What they do is they write your name in a book next to the coordinates of the star, and then place a copyright on the book and file that book with the Library of Congress.
So don't waste your money doing
Don't
that.
waste your money. And the thing is, any company can do it, right? So multiple companies have the same stars named by different people.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Or stars that are totally not visible or may not even exist.
Wow.
Because they pull them from some catalogue and the star may have died or become invisible or was just a mistake.
Oh my gosh. Don't fall for that.
Yeah.
Now that there are heavy lift vehicles like Falcon Heavy, what are some new kinds of satellites that could fully take advantage of large payload mass? Are there good examples like V2 sats that are impossible to deliver without Starship?
So that's going to be a big thing for Starship. Because obviously, Starlink V2 is one of the things that's been specifically cited. Le Voir is another payload where it's a large next generation space telescope and it will fit neatly inside the payload fairing of a Starship. Falcon Heavy, was also named, and Falcon Heavy is great for delivering payloads to, like geostationary orbit using the Falcon 9. The problem is that it can't put really big things in there because it still uses the same fairing that the Falcon 9 uses, and it's actually volume limited rather than mass limited. So you could put 55 tons or something on a Falcon Heavy and put it into low Earth orbit. You would have a hard time fitting 55 tons of spacecraft inside that fairing. Yeah, so Starship, it really shines delivering to low Earth orbit. Less so when you're delivering stuff out to geostationary orbit because that requires multiple refuels. It might actually be cheaper to launch it with a third stage inside the payload fairing. I think that Starship could be enormously useful for delivering space station hardware because those are large, they are mass constrained, and they are going to low Earth orbit. That's one thing I see Starship being useful for. And mega constellations where you're putting a lot of things in relatively low Earth orbit, but it is kind of getting busy up there. So what do we want more mass? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think basically things that are going into deep space won't necessarily benefit from Starship, at least not for years to come, because they would need to be designed with that in mind, and it takes there's a long lead time on these things,
right?
Between defining the requirements and figuring out how to fulfill them and finally delivering on them.
Is it just like mind-blowing to see the development of Starship?
It's mind-blowing to see the whole thing out in the open happening so fast.
Yeah.
There's always been so much to talk about. Like, even the most minor things, changes to the weld patterns. It's like, oh, that's why that tank was failing. And I don't know enough about welding, but there's always somebody out there that does, right? There's always someone that's an expert that knows a bit more and can explain what's going on. I just think it's fabulous to see an aerospace program that is executed like a software program. And I say that in a sort of pejorative way, in that as a software developer, frequently we'll be just like, let's build something quickly and get it out there and work. And you can't generally do that in aerospace because you have to build hardware.
Right.
That's why you have all these like tests and review meetings. And SpaceX down Boca Chica, they're just like, let's just build it, and if it explodes, that's great. Well, more data.
And cool videos.
Cool videos. Wow. I mean, yes.
Are we unique and are we alone? Will Webb answer this?
It would be amazing. See, the thing is, I don't think Webb could ever answer that we are alone in the universe, but it might answer the opposite, right? You can never say we are truly alone in the universe because there's always a chance that it's hiding somewhere. So maybe Webb will give us some clues. Maybe it will see evidence of planetary exoplanet atmospheres which have biosignatures. Something made a beep.
Much later.
Did your interest in space journalism arise after Kerbal Space Program or before? It sounds like it was before.
Well, I was always interested in space, but here's the thing. Before Kerbal Space Program, before I made videos, I didn't realize how little I knew.
Okay.
So making Kerbal Space Program videos, it made very clear that I understood the astronomy, I understood the orbital mechanics. I didn't really understand the rockets as much as I thought.
Right.
And people called me on it. And that in turn, people said, actually you don't quite understand how cryogenic propellants work. And I was like, really? Please tell me more.
Interesting.
So I then began spending a lot of time reading and making sure before I would say things in my Kerbal videos. Because, you're flying a spaceship, you're going to make a burn, and it's going to take 10 minutes. So you're just like, okay, I need to fill airtime. Let me tell you about this story. And then you sort of get the edit and you're like, I should probably Google that just to make sure that I wasn't just making stuff up.
Because I feel like people look to you to educate themselves about this, but
Right.
you had to educate yourself, so was it mostly books?
It was mostly the internet.
Okay.
So there's one book that I got this book as a kid called, it's my dad's book called the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Space Technology, and it turns out that was incredibly important to my life. Like I went and managed to acquire a copy of it recently. It just is full of stuff from the
up to the early 80s.
Oh, do you have that here?
I got it. I'll show you.
see it,
Yes, it's amazing. I looked back at it. I bought it because I wanted to look at it and say, well, now that I'm a fully grown up and I understand this stuff, I'm going to look at this and laugh at how naive I was for believing. It's like, wow, no, this is really good.
Wow.
So no wonder I got this far. Yeah. But yeah, the Kerbal thing was definitely a catalyst, and it just not wanting to make mistakes was the real driver.
Right.
And then, of course, there's just stories that keep on happening, and you want to explain them.
And you do a great job. A lot of people.
Partly because I had to teach myself.
Yeah. It's so cool that the internet allows you to do that. What kind of artificial magnetic field for Mars do you think is the most likely to be built, and will it be land-based, building on a midway orbit, or on Mars moons?
I actually think, well, I don't think Mars moons makes sense. I don't think it will sit between Mars and the Sun. There's one idea for that. Because I saw one study that basically looked at the kind of materials you need for high-quality superconducting magnets versus low-quality magnets that are on Mars, and it's actually a lot easier to build on Mars. So I think we could well see some like equatorial band, or more likely we're just going to see domes on Mars, because Mars has enough atmosphere to block most of the stuff. Mars isn't actually that bad in terms of radiation from space. But if you somehow figured out that there was in fact enough atmosphere on Mars to create a breathable atmosphere, like locked up in frozen areas, you would need an artificial magnetosphere just to stop it getting stripped away over time. But I don't think that's going to happen. So, but even then, yeah, equatorial on the surface is probably the one to go for.
Have you always wanted to go to Mars, or no, not really?
I've always wanted to go in space and stuff. Like if it was just like Star Wars, where you jump in your X-wing and jump to hyperspace and arrive, it'd be like great. But committing to years of time away from the family and very slow communication with the rest of the world, I don't know about that. Yeah. Like I think I could do it, but I think at this point my family wouldn't want me to do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't blame them. What are your favorite sci-fi authors' movies?
My favorite sci-fi authors is Ian M. Banks, but he hasn't had any of his stuff turned into movies. My favorite movies for sci-fi are The Martian, which I think is absolutely an amazing interpretation of that book. And in general, it tells a lot of story and a lot of science in there. I love the visuals in Gravity. I don't think it's that accurate, but I think it's amazing. Star Wars, revolutionary, changed me. 2010, actually, I love in all sorts of interesting ways with its aerobraking and its space tech. And those are the movies that really strike me. But, I like a lot of other stuff that's maybe not all spaceships, let's say. One of my favorite science fiction movies is Primer, which is this little indie movie made for almost no money. And it's about a bunch of, hacker type geeks who build a device that makes time travel possible. Right, and then it's this totally weird convoluted timeline where people keep traveling in loops.
Hey, I want to watch that.
Yeah.
I have not seen that one. We kind of touched on this. What kind of music did you DJ, and do you have any certain story or event that you would like to share?
Well, I obviously played a lot of house music and breaks and stuff. It was always like club DJ stuff. But my sort of most memorable moment was very early on when Sky, my daughter, was like maybe 6 months old. We stopped by a friend's place. Yeah, you would do these parties in at his house up in Healdsburg. And we came the next day because we just wanted to see all our friends. We didn't really think we were going for the party. And they'd sort of all chilled out. And I had some records with me because, I thought I'd play. And I start playing some chill out music, and then Amy's like, "Can you hold Sky for a while?" So I put Sky in the baby carrier, and I'm playing the records, and people start getting interested. And like several hours later, the party is rocking again, and Sky's just like,
"Oh my gosh, that's awesome!"
Yeah, that was sort of like a great moment. Not just because my daughter was there, but because we turned this event that had sort of basically finished, and it just kicked it back in. And the funny thing was, we were planning to stay, but because the party went wild again, we were like, okay, we have to go home.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. So she liked that.
Yeah. You know, she has some great taste in music.
Yeah.
Yeah, she really does. I'm sort of constantly proud that she'll pull out something that either I know or don't know. Like, I remember a few weeks ago, she's like, Dad, I found this really cool band. It's called Venetian Snares. I was like, really? Let me tell you about John Peel playing Venetian Snares 20 years ago.
Oh my
Boy,
gosh.
yeah. No,
How old is she now?
she's 17. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. There's a...
So young in those videos.
Oh yeah, no, she started out on my videos when she was like 4.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And you have 2 kids, right?
I have 2 kids. Orion, who he's much more into video games and he makes his own music.
Cool.
Sky, they're both in Scouts. Sky has been like a patrol leader and like working hard at the Eagle requirements. So.
How old's your son?
He's 16.
Okay. Cool.
No, wait, no, sorry, he's 15. He's gonna be 16.
Close.
Yes.
Is 6 orbital Raptors better than 1 with more fuel on Starship?
6 orbital Raptors better than 1 with more fuel. I mean, they're talking about 6 vacuum Raptors, right?
They must be.
Yeah, versus 1 with more fuel. So I mean, because we're basically saying, is it worth using the bigger vacuum nozzles? Okay, so here's the thing. If you do that, then you can't land it, right? Because you need to be able to gimbal those engines.
Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.
So if you want to be able to fly it, if you're talking about lunar Starship, it might actually make sense. But actually, once lunar Starship gets to orbit, it only really needs the 1 engine. So the mass penalty of the larger nozzles may not matter to it. So I don't know if there's an argument for 6 boosters or 6 vacuum rated engines, because you only really need that early on after stage separation. I mean, after that you only need like the 1 once you get to orbit. I don't know if there's any case where the thrust to mass matters enough. So yeah, probably not.
Okay. If someone wanted to be the first to Mars, could they use a Falcon Heavy and beat Starship to Mars?
If you put a person on it, they would go insane. Like, basically, you would have to put a Dragon spacecraft on there, and you would then have to somehow give them enough consumables and enough trash to be able to survive a trip. So no, I don't think someone could reasonably do that. Now, there was a story a few years ago about, I forget his name, but he was a famous space tourist who wanted to go on a flyby of Mars. And he was thinking this would be about $1 billion. And he was trying to get NASA interested in, supporting this in some way or another, but it never happened. And I can't remember his name.
We will use Google.
Yes.
Do you have trouble understanding American? Some find it hard to understand Scottish English.
I don't find it because I live here.
Yeah.
There's a few moments where I remember in the early days trying to explain what Branson pickle was, and people are like, so it's like a pickle. It's like, no, it's more like a chutney. What's a chutney? Yeah, you know.
What is a chutney?
Right, exactly. There have been moments, but no, and I just, I refuse to say aluminum. Well, you know what I mean. I say aluminium because that's the proper name.
Aluminium, not aluminum.
No, because that's not the real name.
Really?
Yes, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, then we have it all wrong.
Yeah,
That's what I hear.
Humphrey Davy, he originally wanted to call it alumium, and then he changed it to aluminum, and then changed it finally to aluminium. To be in line with everyone else, and that's what the rest of the world uses.
Interesting. All right, we're behind on the times. Is there such a thing as gyroscopic propulsion that would negate the need for liquid propellants to launch a spacefaring vehicle and allow a ship to reach orbit?
Okay, so this sounds like, is there such a thing as a reactionless drive? No, that would violate the laws of physics. So there are various people that have proposed gyroscopes moving in certain ways can produce thrust, and you can actually do it on surfaces where you have some sort of drag. You can't do it when it's floating in 0G. There is company, there is something like spin launch where they spin a thing up and then let
I
it
made a
go.
video about that.
Yeah, and that's not a way for a human to fly. It may
No.
not be the best way for payloads to fly. But yeah, you need to have some sort of reaction mass. Nobody has found a way to work without propellant. Except for solar sails. Those work. And laser propulsion as well. But yeah.
You can tell that I did not write that question. Why is it impossible to get astronauts out to Webb to do repairs?
The main thing is it's a long way out, but really there's no place for them to grab onto. And if they did get out there, they would have this very large heat shield, reflective shield, which is made of this really thin material you would not want to touch. But even if you came in with a spacecraft, you wouldn't want to be firing its engines to touch that. So they'd somehow have to get up there, and then they could only really work on the near side of the shield. If they're going to do servicing to the JWST, it's possible that they only need to do servicing on that one side. They could dock an autonomous spacecraft on there and give it propulsion and life again. It may not. I don't think it's anything that was ever designed to be serviced by humans. In fact, I think that they were probably thinking every now and then that there should be they might have made decisions which specifically precluded humans from touching it, because having humans near your instruments is a sure way to get some sort of damage done to it.
Absolutely.
Hubble is very special, but I don't think I think it may be the only one for a long time that gets that amount of servicing.
What about Louvois?
Louvois is like same design
Same idea.
as JWST, but it's slightly bigger and works in the ultraviolet.
Do you think the race to commercialize space will end up in conflict turf disputes?
Yeah, are you talking? Well, I mean, we're already seeing it. You're seeing people saying your FCC application is wrong, and we would like the FCC to look at this. They're fighting over not turf, but like bandwidth and communications priorities. They're saying like, oh, you can't claim that just because you have a satellite up there. That's not. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing right now. So it's
starting.
Electromagnetic spectrum disputes. I think if people land on planets and stuff, I'm not sure you're going to be seeing fights over that, but you never know.
Thoughts on orbital astronomy?
Oh, we got to have more of it. I keep on saying that we should have built multiple JWSTs. We should be building multiple Hubbles, and we should be putting them up there, because the Hubble is overtaxed as it is. It's oversubscribed, and that means there's demand. And if you can come up with something that is a good design that satisfies 80% of requirements, that's great. You don't necessarily need to have the best of the best always, but I think if you having more telescopes would be great. I just don't want astronomy to absolutely require orbital assets, and that's why we do have to be careful with mega constellations to make sure that we don't have super bright objects out there that will saturate sensors. Like, it's very easy. Most telescopes that are already operating have software in their processing chain to remove satellite trails. The danger is if they get too big and too bright, then you get secondary reflections, which is much harder to remove and can really mess with your signal to noise. I don't think orbital astronomy will ever be 100% required, but equally, I think it's definitely going to be a good thing to have more of.
And the last question, we've made it to the last question. Until now, what is the most personally profound or personally moving space discovery or event that changed your perspective on your place in the universe, and what do you hope for in the next few decades?
I'll tell you. Okay, so personal discoveries. The thing that really got me about Kerbal Space Program was, and this is the thing that probably changed my view of how space is how easy it was to actually fly things without computers. Right? I always thought that you needed to have a a computer actually doing all the navigation. So it turns out that if you have good situational awareness, you can absolutely fly a rocket to orbit. And that just was mind-blowing to me. It gave me a better idea of how capable humans really can be. Now, you want to look at humans in the universe at large. Like, I can certainly look out there and see the space that human signals have traveled across the galaxy and just realized how small it is. I mean, space is big. Yeah, I think my main thing is that just the realization that actually flying in space is a lot easier than I had ever imagined. That was a sort of transformative moment for me.
And then in the next few decades, what are you most excited for?
Being actually able to fly in space.
Yeah.
I'm excited for more and more humans being in space at the same time. And we've seen in the last year the numbers suddenly bump up as we broke the record, and then we broke the record again, and then just before Christmas we had like 18 people in space. No, 19 people in space, and 8 of them were basically tourists.
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I want that number to just keep on going up over time.
Yep. And it will. It will. Well, those are all the questions.
Oh, goodness.
I know.
Great. And we've only managed to burn through one camera.
I know.
But wait! There's more!
You have a lot of gadgets.
I have a lot of gadgets. So yeah, I get given this by a fan. There's 2 things
What
here.
the heck is that?
Is there anything else in here? Wait a second. Oh, wait. What is... Oh! Yeah, no, that one I can't show you.
Okay.
There's a... I'll show it to you off camera.
That's so cool.
Again, I get sent random things over the years, and I get a couple of pieces from Soyuz. Now,
Whoa.
so this is tied in place because it's like a tape measure. You know how tape measures will extend out, right? They fold or they curve.
Okay.
So this actually turns into an antenna when it's released,
Whoa.
like about a yard long,
It
right?
looks long.
Yeah, and so this folds down on the side of the Soyuz, and then after it lands, or just as it gets close to landing, it pops the side off. This antenna unfolds, and this thing starts flashing a light, so it can be found, and it starts transmitting through this thing. So this is basically a locator antenna, beacon from the Soyuz space capsule.
Oh.
Yes, so you can see the Russian. I do not know if this has been flown.
Okay,
This is
that
something
was my
that.
next question.
So this came to me via somebody who, I think it was his father's collection, and his father had passed on. And so yes, looking for a good home for these things.
Wow.
And so we didn't really have good information on it, but all the same, I'm really proud to have a piece
so
of
cool.
Soyuz. And similarly, this, I believe that this is from. So this is also from the inside of a Soyuz capsule, and this is part of the cooling system. I believe this is a manual pump handle that is used for when you get condensation that's collected in one place and you need to pump it over to the other module. So this is designed for pumping water around. I can't read Russian, but you can see there's a lot of... So this would sit on the right-hand side underneath the control panel. You can just about make it out, but there, you've got it.
Did this one fly?
Again, don't know.
Don't know. Same person sent you both of these?
Yes.
Okay.
So this, I've seen this. This is condensation. I looked for this before.
Wow.
It's very cool gizmo to find.
Yeah, how did they even acquire these?
eBay.
Okay.
So there's a lot of stuff that ends up on eBay. The problem is they will frequently overstate their how much they've flown or things like that. Because obviously flown hardware has a premium. So I can't guarantee that this is flown or not.
Someone did ask me when you were going to get more shelves for your
Oh my goodness.
studio.
Yeah, well, you can see I've got a bunch of stuff down here, mostly records. So yeah, well, boy, those are some serious questions. I'm glad that I managed to survive the Inquisition.
It was kind of long.
Yes, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Yes. But yes, well, I guess you're going to be heading back and editing this.
I will be editing this. I'm so excited to share this.
Well, I'm going to say, fly safe, right?
Yes, exactly.
I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.
Awesome.